The coffee was still warm. That's the detail that haunts me, even now. The way something so ordinary could exist in the middle of something so monstrous. I remember lifting the cup, the heat bleeding through the ceramic into my palms, and thinking how strange it was that the world kept functioning in such mundane ways while my entire life was ending around me. My name is Alara Vance. For 12 years, I served the city of Crestfall as a homicide detective. For 8 of those years, I was the best they had. I closed cases other detectives called unsolvable. I looked into the eyes of killers and made them flinch first. I built a reputation on the unshakable foundation of my instincts, my integrity, and my gun. That gun was now pressed into the dead hand of Alderman Marcus Webb. He sat slumped in his kitchen chair, a single bullet wound precisely centered in his forehead. The kind of shot only a trained professional could make. The kind of shot I could make in my sleep. His breakfast was still on the table. Eggs, cold now. Toast, barely touched. The coffee I'd been holding when I walked in? That was his too. I'd taken a sip before I saw him. Before I saw the blood. Before I saw my service weapon resting against his slack fingers like a lover's goodbye. 3 minutes. That's how long I estimated I had before my partner, Detective Marks, arrived for our scheduled meeting with Webb. 3 minutes to understand how the world had just flipped upside down. 3 minutes to figure out who hated me enough to destroy me so completely. I didn't move at first. I just stood there, frozen in the doorway of Webb's luxury penthouse, watching the morning light filter through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city I'd sworn to protect. The city that would soon be hunting me like an animal. My mind raced through the possibilities, rejecting each one as quickly as it came. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't real. I'd been set up before, in small ways, a misplaced file, a witness who changed their story. But this? This was execution-style precision. This was someone who knew my schedule, my access codes, my partnership with Marks. Someone who knew I'd been investigating Webb for corruption. Someone who knew I was getting too close. I stepped closer to the body, my tactical training screaming at me to preserve the scene even as every survival instinct demanded I run. I crouched beside Webb, careful not to touch anything. His eyes were open, still surprised. Whoever did this wanted him to see it coming. Wanted him to know. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, the reflex to call it in nearly overwhelming. But I stopped myself. What would I say? That I found a dead man with my gun in his hand? That I had no idea how it got there? I was a detective. I knew how this looked. I knew how this would end. I stood and backed away, my heel hitting something on the marble floor. A shell casing. I bent to examine it without touching. Standard issue. The same ammunition I loaded into my magazine every morning without thinking. Ballistics would match. They always did. The air left my lungs. For a moment, the room spun, and I gripped the back of a dining chair to steady myself. This wasn't just a frame job. This was someone who wanted me dead. Not physically dead, worse than that. They wanted Alara Vance, the incorruptible detective, erased. They wanted my name to become synonymous with betrayal. They wanted every case I'd ever worked reopened, every conviction I'd ever secured questioned. They wanted my legacy to rot. I forced myself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The way I taught myself during my first year on the force, when the bodies started piling up and the nightmares wouldn't stop. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. I had minutes, maybe less, to make a choice that would define the rest of my life. I could stay. I could wait for Marks, explain everything, trust the system I'd served my entire adult life. But even as the thought formed, I knew it was suicide. The evidence was too clean, too perfect. Whoever orchestrated this had resources, connections. They'd already won the battle before I even knew there was a war. Or I could run. I could become the fugitive they'd already made me. I could disappear into the city I knew better than anyone and fight back from the shadows. I could find the truth before it found me. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. I moved fast, my training taking over. I pulled a pair of latex gloves from my pocket, force of habit, always prepared, and wiped down every surface I might have touched. the coffee cup, the door handle, the counter where I dropped my keys when I first walked in. I couldn't erase my presence entirely, but I could muddy it. Buy myself time. I looked at Web 1 last time. We hadn't been friends. He was a politician, which meant he was at least partially guilty of something. But he didn't deserve this. He was a means to an end for whoever killed him, a pawn sacrifice to take down a bigger target. Me. I'll find who did this, I whispered. I swear it. Then I took my gun back. I know how that looks. But leaving it there would have been an admission. Taking it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I pried it from his cold fingers, feeling the weight of it in my palm, and tucked it into the back of my waistband. The grip was warm. From his hand, or mine. I couldn't tell anymore. I moved to the door, pressing my ear against the cool wood. The hallway was silent. I cracked it open, peered through the gap. Empty. I slipped out, pulling the door closed behind me, and walked toward the emergency stairwell with the calm, measured pace of someone who belonged there. Not too fast. Not too slow. Just another resident heading down for morning coffee. The stairwell echoed with my footsteps, each one a countdown to the moment my life would officially end. 3 floors down, I heard it. The distant ding of an elevator. Voices. Marks, asking questions. The super, letting him in. I froze against the wall, listening to the muffled sounds above me. They'd find the body soon. They'd call it in. And within the hour, my face would be on every screen in the city. I ran. Not the panic sprint of the guilty, but the controlled, purposeful movement of someone with somewhere to be. I hit the ground floor, emerged into the lobby, and walked past the doorman with a nod. He smiled back, oblivious. I was just another resident. Just another face. Outside, the city roared to life around me. Taxis honked. Commuters rushed past with their headphones and their coffee and their complete ignorance of the woman among them whose world had just collapsed. I blended in. Disappeared into the crowd. Let the current carry me away from the building, away from the body, away from everything I'd been. My apartment was out. My car was out. My friends, my colleagues, my entire support system, all of it contaminated. I had nothing now except the clothes on my back, the gun in my waistband, and 12 years of knowledge about how people like me got caught. I found a cheap motel on the edge of the city, paid in cash, and locked myself in a room that smelled of cigarettes and despair. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands finally shaking, and watched the news. There it was. Breaking story. Detective sought in murder of city official. My photo filled the screen. My name, spoken like a curse. Alara Vance, a 12-year veteran of the force, wanted for questioning in the death of Alderman Marcus Webb. Sources say evidence at the scene points to her involvement. She is considered armed and extremely dangerous. Armed and dangerous. They made me sound like a monster. Maybe I was becoming one. I turned off the TV and sat in the silence, listening to my own heartbeat. Somewhere out there, the real killer was celebrating. Somewhere out there, the person who destroyed my life was watching the same broadcast, smiling. But they made one mistake. They left me alive. They left me free. And they had no idea what kind of enemy they'd just created. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. The priest is coming. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. The priest. Detective Kalen Thorne. The one man in the entire department who could actually find me. The one man whose mind worked like a scalpel, dissecting evidence until the truth bled out. If they'd assigned him to my case, it meant they wanted me caught. Not killed. Caught. They wanted me in a cage, where I could be controlled. Where I could be silenced permanently. I should have been terrified. But instead, I felt something else entirely. Hope. Because Kalen Thorne didn't hunt the guilty. He hunted the truth. And if I could reach him before the lies did, if I could make him see what I saw, then maybe, just maybe, I had a chance. The hunter was coming. But he didn't know yet that the prey was hunting too. 3 days. 3 days of sleeping in shadows, eating from gas stations, and watching my own face stare back at me from every screen in the city. 3 days of becoming a ghost in the very streets I once patrolled with authority. The worst part wasn't the hunger or the fear. It was the silence. The complete, suffocating isolation of knowing that anyone who recognized me would turn me in. That everyone I'd ever trusted was now a liability. I watched him from across the street, tucked into the doorway of a shuttered bookstore. Detective Kalen Thorne stood outside the motel office, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on the room I'd abandoned hours earlier. He didn't move like other detectives. There was no impatience, no restless energy. He stood with the stillness of a man who had learned that time was his ally, not his enemy. The morning light caught the sharp angles of his face, the quiet intensity in his eyes. I'd seen him before, of course. Our paths crossed in the department hallways, at crime scenes, in briefings. But I'd never really looked at him. Not like this. From a distance, with nothing to do but observe, I finally understood why they called him the priest. It wasn't just the way he carried himself, that quiet, almost monastic devotion to the work. It was the way people responded to him. The motel manager, a hardened woman who'd seen everything, was speaking to him with her arms wrapped around herself, her voice soft, almost reverent. He wasn't interrogating her. He was listening. Really listening. And she was giving him everything. I pulled deeper into the shadows, my heart hammering against my ribs. He was good. Better than I remembered. In 3 days, he'd already tracked me to this forgotten corner of the city. Not through luck or informants. Through evidence. Through thinking the way I thought. Because here was the truth they didn't put in the headlines. Kalen Thorne and I were the same. We both came up through the ranks the hard way. We both trusted the science more than the stories. We both stayed late when everyone else went home, chasing details that didn't fit, questions that wouldn't close. I'd heard the rumors about his past, the sister who died unsolved, the case that broke him open and rebuilt him into something colder. I'd never asked. We weren't close enough for that. But I understood loss. I understood what it did to a person. He turned suddenly, his gaze sweeping across the street. I pressed myself flat against the door, holding my breath. For one endless second, I felt his attention like a physical weight. Then he looked away, speaking into his radio, and moved toward his car. I waited until he was gone before I allowed myself to breathe. That night, I broke into my first crime scene. Not a major one, just a storage unit on the edge of the industrial district where I kept backup files, personal notes, the kind of evidence that never made it into official reports. It was a habit I developed years ago, after watching a corrupt lieutenant bury a case that should have sent a killer to prison. I'd learned then that the system could fail. That sometimes the only person you could trust was yourself. The unit was undisturbed. I pulled out boxes of files on the web investigation, spreading them across the concrete floor under the weak glow of a single bulb. Somewhere in here was the answer. Somewhere in here was the thread that, if pulled, would unravel everything. I worked through the night, my eyes burning, my body screaming for rest. And as dawn broke through the dusty windows, I found it. A name. Buried in financial records I'd pulled from Webb's offshore accounts. A name I recognized, though I wished I didn't. Deputy Chief Marcus Cole. The man who'd been my mentor. The man who'd promoted me, defended me, shaped me into the detective I'd become. The man who'd assigned Kalen Thorne to my case. I sat back on my heels, the paper trembling in my hands. It didn't make sense. Cole was the one who'd encouraged me to investigate Webb in the first place. He'd given me the initial tip, pointed me toward the corruption, pushed me to dig deeper. Had it all been a setup? Had he been using me to get close to Webb, only to sacrifice me when I got too close to him? The betrayal hit like a physical blow. I doubled over, my forehead pressing against my knees, fighting the urge to scream. 12 years. 12 years of loyalty, of trust, of believing in something bigger than myself. And it had all been built on a lie. I heard the car before I saw it. Tires on gravel, moving slow. Deliberate. I killed the light and pressed myself against the wall, peering through the grimy window. A sedan rolled to a stop 20 yards from my unit. The door opened. Kalen Thorne stepped out. He didn't approach immediately. He stood by the car, his hands in his coat pockets, his breath misting in the cold air. He looked tired. The kind of tired that came from not sleeping, from chasing a ghost through a city that never rested. I wondered if he'd figured it out yet. If he knew he was hunting the wrong person. Alara. His voice carried through the silence, quiet but unmistakable. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. I know you're in there. I found the motel because you left a trace, a single hair on the pillow. Not enough for DNA, but enough to confirm you'd been there. I found the storage unit because you paid the rent in cash, but you used the same ATM you've used for 5 years. Same pattern. Same timing. You're too smart to make big mistakes, but you're human. You make small ones. Silence. I could hear my own heartbeat. I'm not here to arrest you. Liar, I thought. That's what they all said. If I wanted you in cuffs, I'd have brought backup. I'd have surrounded this place and waited you out. But I came alone. At 4 in the morning. In an unmarked car. Do you understand what that means? I understood. It meant he had questions. It meant the evidence wasn't adding up. It meant the priest was doing what the priest always did, following the truth, wherever it led. I stepped out of the shadows. He didn't flinch. Didn't reach for his weapon. He just watched me with those quiet eyes, taking in everything at once, the exhaustion, the fear, the desperate hope I couldn't quite hide. You look terrible, he said. I almost laughed. Almost. You look like hell yourself. A ghost of something crossed his face. Not quite a smile, but close. I've been working. So I heard. The priest is hunting me. The whole department's talking about it. He tilted his head, studying me. They're talking about you too. About how you snapped. How Webb must have threatened you, and you lost control. It's a good story. Almost believable. Almost. Almost. He took a step closer. I tensed, but didn't retreat. The problem with good stories is they never fit all the facts. Webb was shot at close range with your weapon. But there were no signs of struggle. No defensive wounds. He was sitting comfortably, eating breakfast, when someone walked in and executed him. You're a better detective than that. If you'd wanted him dead, you'd have made it look like something else. An accident. A robbery. Anything but this. Hope flickered in my chest. So you believe me? I believe the evidence. And the evidence says this was too perfect. Too clean. Someone wanted you to be guilty. They wanted it so badly they forgot to make it look real. I exhaled, a sound that was almost a sob. For 3 days, I'd carried this alone. For 3 days, I'd wondered if I was losing my mind, if the paranoia was justified, if anyone in the world would ever see the truth. And now here he was. The one man I'd feared most. Believing me. Cole, I said. His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. What about him? I found records. Offshore accounts. Webb was paying him off, and Cole was feeding him information. When I got too close, Cole pointed me at Webb to keep me busy. But then I found something else, a connection to a bigger operation. Human trafficking. Drugs. I don't know the full scope yet. But Webb was going to talk. He was going to give Cole up to save himself. Kalen was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Cole assigned me to your case personally. Told me to use every resource. Told me to bring you in at any cost. Of course he did. He knew you'd find me. He knew you wouldn't stop until you did. And when you brought me in, I'd either be killed resisting or I'd end up in a cell where I couldn't hurt him anymore. And if I brought you in alive, then I'd tell my story. And who would believe a disgraced detective over the deputy chief? He nodded slowly, processing. Then he looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. I would. The words hung between us, heavy with meaning. This wasn't just about the case anymore. This was about trust. About choosing a side. About risking everything for someone he barely knew. Why? I asked. Why would you risk your career for me? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "Because I know what it's like to lose everything to a lie. Because I spent 10 years watching my sister's killer walk free while the system protected itself. Because when I look at you, I don't see a fugitive. I see someone fighting for the same thing I've been fighting for my whole life. The truth." He was fighting for the truth. And in that moment, standing in the cold dawn with the man who was supposed to hunt me, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. We didn't trust each other. Not really. But we had something better. We had mutual need. Kalen drove us to a safe house he kept off the books, a tiny apartment above a closed bakery that smelled like stale bread and loneliness. He'd used it before, he explained, for witnesses who needed to disappear, for cases that required discretion the department couldn't provide. The walls were thin, the furniture was cheap, but it had locks on the doors and windows that faced a brick wall. No one would find me here. "You sleep," he said, dropping a bag of groceries on the counter. "I'll work." I wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed at me to stay alert, to keep moving, to never let my guard down. But my body had other ideas. 3 days without real rest had caught up with me. I collapsed onto the worn couch and was unconscious before my head hit the cushion. When I woke, the light through the windows had shifted from grey to gold. Evening. I'd slept the day away. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then I heard his voice, low and intense, coming from the kitchen. "No, I'm telling you, the timeline doesn't match. Pull the security footage from the parking garage again. Look at the timestamps. I think you'll find something interesting." A pause. He was on the phone, speaking to someone in the department. I held my breath, listening. "Just do it. And keep it between us. I'm not ready to bring this to Cole yet." Yeah, I know. Just trust me." He ended the call and I heard him exhale slowly, the weight of the deception pressing down on him. He was feeding information to a colleague, building an alternative case, working against his own boss. If Cole found out, Kalen's career would be over. Worse, probably. Men like Cole didn't just fire their enemies, they destroyed them. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, a mug in his hand. "You're awake." How long was I out? 12 hours. You needed it. He crossed to the couch and handed me the mug. Coffee. Hot and strong, just the way I liked it. The familiarity of it made my chest ache. "I've been busy." I heard. Who was that? Forensic analyst. Kid named Reyes. He owes me from a case last year. His running down the garage footage from the morning Webb was killed. If we can prove you were there at the wrong time, or that someone else accessed your car, then we have reasonable doubt. We have a thread, and threads can be pulled. I took a sip of the coffee, letting the warmth spread through me. What else? He hesitated, just for a moment, but I caught it. There's something you need to see. He led me to the small kitchen table, where his laptop sat open to a security feed. Grainy black and white footage of a parking garage. The timestamp showed 6:47 a.m., 43 minutes before I'd arrived at Webb's building. "Watch," he said. I watched. A figure emerged from the stairwell, moving with purpose. Dark clothing. Hood up. Face angled away from the cameras. They approached a vehicle I recognized immediately. My car. My unmarked department-issued sedan. The figure paused beside the driver's door, did something with their hands, too quick to follow, and then walked away. The entire interaction lasted less than 15 seconds. "Someone accessed my car," I breathed. "Someone planted your gun. Or took it. Or both." Kalen pointed at the screen. "Look at the walk. The posture. Does that look familiar?" I studied the figure. The way they moved. The confident stride, the squared shoulders, the slight hesitation before the turn. Something twisted in my gut. "Cole," I whispered. "Could be. The build is right. But we need more." He pulled up another file. I ran the financial records you found. The offshore accounts trace back to a shell company. That company owns 3 properties in the industrial district. Warehouses. All of them registered under fake names. but the paper trail leads to one address. Cole's brother-in-law. My mind raced. So Cole was taking money from Webb, laundering it through family, using the profits to fund. What? That's the question. Kaylin closed the laptop and turned to face me fully. Alara, if we follow this, there's no going back. We are not just investigating a murder anymore. We are investigating the Deputy Chief of Police. We are talking about conspiracy, corruption, probably worse. If we are wrong, we are not wrong. If we are wrong, we both go down. You to prison, me to disgrace. And if we are right, we still might not survive. He nodded slowly. The weight of it settled between us, heavy and real. That's when my phone buzzed. I'd kept it off for days, too afraid of tracking signals. But Kaylin had given me a burner, a cheap flip phone with a single contact programmed. Only he had the number. Only he could reach me. I flipped it open. A text. From an unknown number. You're closer than you think. But so is he. Get out now. I stared at the screen, my blood icing over. Someone knows. Kaylin was already moving, grabbing his coat, his weapon. Show me. I handed him the phone. He read the message, his jaw tightening. This came from inside the department. Has to. The timing. Gunfire. The window behind us exploded. I hit the floor on instinct, Kaylin's body covering mine as glass rained down around us. Another shot. Another. Automatic weapons, from the sound of it. Multiple shooters. They'd found us. They'd found us and they weren't taking chances. Back door. Kaylin shouted, pulling me toward the kitchen. Go. We crawled through the shattered glass, Kaylin returning fire blind through the broken window. The apartment door splintered as someone kicked it in. I caught a glimpse of dark figures, tactical gear, the unmistakable shape of police-issued rifles. They weren't here to arrest me. They were here to silence us both. The kitchen had a rear door that opened onto a fire escape. Kaylin slammed it open and shoved me through, following close behind as bullets tore through the walls behind us. We clattered down the metal stairs, dropping into an alley reeking of garbage and diesel. Split up. I gasped. No. Stay close. They'll expect us to separate. We ran. The alley opened onto a side street, empty except for a single delivery truck. Kaylin grabbed my arm and pulled me toward it, checking the cab, empty, keys in the ignition. A gift from whatever God was still watching over us. He drove. I hunched low in the passenger seat, watching the street behind us, waiting for the flashing lights that would mean the end. But nothing came. Just the empty city, indifferent to our survival. After 20 minutes, Kaylin pulled into an underground parking structure and cut the engine. We sat in silence, breathing hard, hearts racing. They knew, I finally said. They knew exactly where we were. Kaylin's hands gripped the steering wheel, white-knuckled. Someone in the department. Someone close to Cole. Maybe Reyes. Maybe someone higher. Or maybe you were followed. He shook his head. I wasn't. I've been doing this too long to make that mistake. Then it's someone you trusted. The accusation hung in the air. He flinched, just slightly, and I saw the cost of this alliance written on his face. He'd spent his entire career building a reputation for independence, for integrity. And now, because of me, he was learning that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. I'm sorry, I said quietly. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and something shifted between us. The professional distance I'd maintained since the storage unit dissolved, replaced by something rawer. More human. Don't be, he said. I knew what I was signing up for. Did you? Because I don't think either of us knew how deep this goes. Cole isn't just protecting himself. He's protecting an operation. A network. We are not chasing one corrupt cop anymore. I know. So why stay? You could walk away. Tell Cole you couldn't find me. Go back to your life. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. Because I've spent 12 years chasing cases that mattered. putting away people who deserved it. And for what? So men like Cole could profit? So the system could protect itself while the rest of us bled? He shook his head. No. This is what matters now. You're what matters now. The words hit me harder than they should have. I looked away, afraid of what he might see in my eyes. We need a new plan, I said, forcing my voice steady. Somewhere safe. Somewhere off the grid. I know a place. But it's a long drive. And we can't use main roads. Then we drive. He nodded, putting the truck in gear. As we pulled out of the garage and into the night, I caught his reflection in the side mirror. The exhaustion. The determination. The quiet intensity that had made him the best detective in the city. The hunter and the hunted, running together. And somewhere in the darkness behind us, the real monster was still watching. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt road so overgrown it almost wasn't there anymore. Kaylin's grandfather had built it decades ago, a hunting retreat that had become a family secret passed down through generations. No electricity. No running water. No cell service. Perfect. We arrived just before dawn, the truck barely making it up the final incline. The cabin was small. One room with a stone fireplace, a cast iron stove, 2 narrow beds pushed against opposite walls. Dust covered everything. Spider webs draped the corners like forgotten curtains. Home sweet home, Kaylin said, setting down the supplies we'd grabbed from a 24-hour store 3 towns back. I stood in the doorway, taking it in. It's perfect. He raised an eyebrow. It's a shack. It's hidden. That's what matters. We worked in silence for the next hour, cleaning, organizing, building a fire. There was something intimate about it, the shared purpose, the wordless cooperation. He'd gather wood while I swept. I'd boil water while he checked the perimeter. We moved around each other like dancers who'd learned the steps without ever practicing. By midday, the cabin was livable. Kaylin sat at the small wooden table, his laptop open, using a satellite booster to get a weak internet connection. I sat on the floor by the fire, watching him work. What are you looking for? I asked. Everything. Cole's financials. The warehouse properties. Any connection between him and the shooters last night. He rubbed his eyes. There's something there. I just need to find it. I stood and walked to the table, looking over his shoulder. His searches were methodical, each one building on the last. He'd been at this for hours, probably longer, running on adrenaline and coffee. When did you last sleep? He didn't look up. I'm fine. Kaylin. Something in my voice made him pause. He looked at me, and I saw the exhaustion he'd been hiding. The shadows under his eyes. The slight tremor in his hands. I'll sleep when this is done. That might be too late. I pulled out the chair across from him and Saturday. We are no good to anyone if we collapse. You taught me that. Cases are won by the detectives who can think clearly, not the ones who run themselves into the ground. A ghost of a smile. You're quoting me. I'm listening to you. There's a difference. He leaned back, studying me with those quiet eyes. You're different than I expected. How so? I've watched you for years. From a distance. You were always so controlled. So perfect. The cases you closed, the way you handled yourself. I thought you were made of stone. And now I see the cracks. He said it gently, without judgment. The fear, the doubt, the way you check the windows every few minutes, even though we are miles from anyone. You're human after all. I should have been offended. Instead, I felt something loosen in my chest. I've been hiding it for a long time. The cracks, I mean. You have to, in our job. Show weakness and they eat you alive. I know. He looked away, toward the fire. My sister used to say I was made of stone too. After she died, I proved her right. The mention of his sister hung in the air between us. I'd heard rumors, of course, everyone had. But I'd never asked. Never felt I had the right. What happened to her? He was quiet so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, She was 17. Walking home from a friend's house. Someone grabbed her off the street. They found her 3 days later in an abandoned building. Case went unsolved. Still unsolved. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. But his voice cracked on the last word, betraying him. I reached across the table and touched his hand. Just briefly. Just enough to say what words couldn't. He looked at my hand on his, then at me. Something passed between us. Recognition, maybe. The understanding that we were both carrying wounds that hadn't fully healed. We should eat, he said finally, pulling away gently. Then we work. That night, we shared a meal of canned soup and stale crackers. The fire crackled. The wind whispered through gaps in the walls. And slowly, carefully, we talked. Not about the case. About ourselves. He told me about growing up in this part of the state, about his grandfather who taught him to hunt, about the loneliness of being the quiet kid who preferred books to people. I told him about my father, a cop who died in the line of duty when I was 12. About joining the force to honor his memory. About the slow realization that the system I'd sworn to protect was rotten at its core. I never wanted to be here, I admitted, staring into the flames. I mean, I wanted to be a detective. I wanted to make a difference. But I never wanted to be the one fighting from the outside. I believed in the badge. I believed in the institution. And now I believe in people. Individuals. You. Me. The ones willing to risk everything for what's right. I looked at him. That's a harder belief. But it's more honest. He held my gaze. The firelight played across his face, softening the sharp edges. I know what you mean. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was full. Heavy with things unsaid but understood. I woke sometime later to darkness and cold. The fire had died. Kaylin was standing by the window, looking out at the night. Can't sleep. I whispered, crossing to him. Thinking. About. He turned to face me. In the darkness, I could barely make out his features. But I felt his presence, solid and warm. About what happens after. If we survive this. If we actually manage to bring Cole down. What then? You're still a fugitive. I'm still a detective who helped a wanted criminal. There's no clean ending here. I moved closer. There's no ending at all. Not really. Just continuations. New chapters. Is that enough for you? Is it enough for you? He didn't answer with words. He reached out, his hand cupping my face, his thumb tracing the line of my cheekbone. The touch was gentle. Questioning. Asking permission. I gave it. The kiss was soft at first. Tentative. Two people who'd spent so long behind walls they'd forgotten how to let anyone in. But then something shifted. The desperation, the fear, the hope, and it deepened into something more. His arms wrapped around me. My hands fisted in his shirt. For one perfect moment, the world outside ceased to exist. When we finally pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine. I shouldn't have done that, he whispered. Why not? Because it complicates everything. I almost laughed. Everything is already complicated. This is the first thing that's felt simple in days. He pulled back just enough to look at me. Alara. Don't. I pressed my fingers to his lips. Don't analyze this. Don't treat it like evidence. Just let it be what it is. He nodded slowly. And when he kissed me again, there was no hesitation. No calculation. Just two people who'd found each other in the dark. Morning came too soon. I woke in one of the narrow beds, wrapped in blankets that smelled like dust and him. He was already at the table, laptop open, coffee cold and forgotten beside him. You found something. He looked up, and the expression on his face made my stomach drop. Reyes. The analyst I trusted. He's dead. I sat up slowly, the warmth of the night before draining away. How? Car accident. Late last night. Single vehicle, ran off the road into a river. His voice was flat. Controlled. They're calling it accidental. But I pulled the records. His brakes were cut. The room felt suddenly colder. He found something. Before they killed him, he found something. Kalen nodded. He emailed me last night. Attached a file. I didn't see it until this morning. He turned the laptop toward me. Security footage from the warehouse district. 3 nights before Webb was killed. Look. I crossed to the table and watched. Grainy footage of a loading dock. A figure emerged from a side door, glanced around, then walked to a waiting car. The face was visible for just a moment, long enough. Deputy Chief Marcus Cole. And behind him, through the open door, stacks of what looked like human cargo. Cages. Children. I stumbled back, my hand covering my mouth. Oh God. Human trafficking. Webb was the money launderer. Cole was the protector. They've been running this for years, using the department's resources to keep it hidden. Kalen's voice was hollow. And Reyes died because he found it. I stood there, frozen, the weight of it crushing down on me. Children. Innocent lives. And I'd been so focused on my own survival I hadn't seen the bigger picture. We end this, I said quietly. For Reyes. For those children. For everyone Cole has destroyed. Kalen stood, crossing to me. He took my hands in his, and the touch grounded me, pulled me back from the edge. How? We go to the warehouse. Tonight. We get proof. Real proof. Then we go to the press, the FBI, anyone who will listen. Or we die trying. I looked up at him. Into those quiet eyes that had seen too much. Are you with me? He didn't hesitate. I'm with you. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. A storm was coming. But we'd face it together. The warehouse loomed against the night sky like a wound on the horizon. We'd driven for 3 hours, parked the truck a mile out, and walked the rest of the way through brush and broken ground. Kalen moved ahead of me, silent as a ghost, his weapon drawn. I followed 2 steps behind, my own gun a familiar weight in my palm. The same gun that had killed Alderman Webb. The same gun I'd reclaimed from his dead fingers. It felt different now. Heavier. Like it carried not just bullets but consequences. The warehouse was larger than I'd expected. A sprawling complex of corrugated steel and broken windows, surrounded by chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Lights burned in a few windows, but most of the building sat in darkness. Waiting. There, Kalen whispered, pointing toward a side door. Loading dock. Where Reyes's footage came from. We approached carefully, keeping to the shadows. The fence had been cut, recently, by the look of it. Fresh wire ends glinted in the weak moonlight. Someone had been here before us. Someone who wanted in. Or out. We slipped through the gap and crossed the open ground to the building. The side door was unlocked. Of course it was. They weren't expecting company. They thought they'd won. Inside, the air changed. Heavy. Metallic. Underneath it, something else. A smell I recognized from too many crime scenes. Fear. Sweat. The sour stench of human suffering. Kalen put a finger to his lips. I nodded. We moved through corridors stacked with crates, their labels faded and false. Through doorways that opened onto rooms filled with nothing. Deeper and deeper into the belly of the beast. Then we heard it. Crying. High and thin. The sound of children. I broke into a run, Kalen right behind me. The corridor opened into a larger space, a converted storage area lined with cages. Metal bars. Concrete floors. Thin mattresses stained and filthy. And inside, huddled together for warmth, maybe a dozen children. The youngest looked no more than 5. The oldest, maybe 12. I stopped dead, my hand covering my mouth. Kalen cursed softly beside me. Oh God, I whispered. Oh God, oh God. The children saw us. Fear flashed across their faces. One of the older ones, a boy with hollow cheeks and defiant eyes, stepped in front of the others. Who are you? He demanded. His voice cracked, but he held his ground. I'm Alara, I said softly, crouching to his level. I'm here to help. I'm going to get you out. You're not one of them. No, I'm not one of them. Something shifted in his expression. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of it. Behind me, Kalen was already working on the cage locks. Heavy-duty padlocks, but the bars were old, the metal corroded. He found a weak point and pulled, his muscles straining, until the gap widened enough for a child to slip through. Start with the smallest, he said. Get them out. I'll find proof. I nodded and turned back to the children. Come on. One at a time. Quiet as you can. We worked in frantic silence, passing children through the gap. They were terrified, but they obeyed. Years of survival had taught them to listen to anyone who offered a way out. The boy who'd spoken first helped, guiding the younger ones, keeping them calm. Kalen disappeared into the warehouse's depths, searching for records, evidence, anything that would connect Cole to this horror. I stayed with the children, counting them as they emerged. 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 children, stolen from their families, hidden in this hell. The last one through was a girl, maybe 7, with braided hair and wide eyes. She clutched a ragged stuffed rabbit to her chest and didn't make a sound. I gathered her in my arms and carried her to the others, who huddled together against the cold wall. Where do we go? The older boy asked. Wait here. Just for a few more minutes. My friend is coming back, and then we'll all leave together. He nodded, trusting me in a way that broke my heart. Footsteps. Heavy. Coming fast. I spun, raising my gun. Kalen. Running. His face pale. We have to go. Now. He's here. Who? But I already knew. Deputy Chief Marcus Cole stepped out of the shadows behind Kalen, a gun pressed to the back of Kalen's head. His smile was the same smile he'd worn at my promotion ceremony, at department parties, at every moment he'd played the mentor while planning my destruction. Hello, Alara, he said. I knew you'd come. I was counting on it. I kept my gun raised, but I couldn't fire. Not with Kalen in the way. Not with the children behind me. Let him go, Marcus. This is between us. Oh, it's much bigger than that. He gestured with his free hand at the warehouse around us. This is years of work. Millions of dollars. Connections that reach far beyond this city. You think I did this alone? I'm a small player, Alara. A cog. But cogs are replaceable. And so are you. Then why not just kill us? Why the game? Because killing a decorated detective is messy. Killing a fugitive who killed her partner resisting arrest? That's clean. That's closed case. He pressed the gun harder against Kalen's skull. Drop your weapon. I hesitated. Now, or I blow his head off. I looked at Kalen. His eyes met mine. Calm. Accepting. He gave the slightest shake of his head. Don't do it, he was saying. Don't give up. But I couldn't watch him die. Not after everything. Not after last night. I dropped my gun. It clattered on the concrete, and something in me died with the sound. Cole smiled wider. Good girl. Now step away from the children. Leave them out of this. They're evidence. Just like you. He gestured with his chin. Step away. I moved slowly, putting distance between myself and the huddled children. The older boy watched with terrified eyes, and I tried to convey something with my look. Stay quiet. Stay hidden. Survive. Cole kept the gun on Kalen as he circled, positioning himself between us and the exit. He was going to kill us both. I saw it in his eyes. This wasn't an arrest. This was an execution. You know, Cole said almost conversationally, I really did like you, Alara. You had potential. More than Thorn here. You were going to be something. But you couldn't leave it alone. You had to dig. You had to know. The truth tends to come out, I said. Does it? Look around. Who's going to tell it? These children? They don't speak English. They don't even know what country they're in. And you too. You'll be dead. The truth dies with you. Kalen moved. It was fast, faster than I'd ever seen anyone move. He dropped low, spinning, his elbow driving into Cole's ribs. The gun fired, wild, the bullet screaming past my ear. I dove for my weapon as Kalen and Cole struggled, trading blows in the darkness. I grabbed my gun and looked up. Cole had Kalen on the ground. His gun was pressed to Kalen's chest. Their eyes met. Cole smiled. "Goodbye, detective." The shot that followed was deafening. But it wasn't Kalen who fell. Cole staggered backward, his hand going to his shoulder. Blood seeped through his fingers. He looked at me, disbelief on his face. I hadn't fired. Behind him, the older boy stood trembling, holding a small revolver. One of the guards, maybe, dropped in the chaos. His hand shook, but his aim had been true. "You," Cole gasped. "You little." I fired. Not to kill. To wound. Cole's leg buckled and he went down, screaming. Kalen was on him in an instant, disarming him, pinning him to the concrete. I ran to the boy and knelt beside him, gently taking the gun from his shaking hands. "It's okay," I whispered. "It's okay. You're safe. You're all safe." He looked at me with those hollow, defiant eyes. "He was going to kill you." "Yes. And you saved us. You're a hero." Something flickered in his face. Not quite belief, but the beginning of it. Sirens in the distance. FBI. We'd called them before we entered, sent Reyes's evidence to a dozen different addresses. They were coming. Kalen limped over, blood running from a cut on his forehead. He looked at the children, at me, at Cole bleeding on the floor. "It's over," he said quietly. I looked at him, at the children, at the warehouse that had held so much darkness. "It's just beginning," I said. 3 months later, I stood on the steps of the federal courthouse and watched Marcus Cole be led away in chains. The investigation had grown beyond anything we'd imagined. A network of corruption stretching across 4 states. Dozens of arrests. And 12 children returned to their families, thanks to the boy with the defiant eyes. His name was Mateo. He wrote me letters now, in careful English. He wanted to be a detective someday. Kalen found me after the press conference ended. He stood beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. "You did it," he said. "We did it." He was quiet for a moment. Then, they offered me my job back. Full reinstatement. Apology from the mayor. And I turned it down. I looked at him. Why? Because I'm not the same person who took that job. Because I spent 12 years believing in a system that nearly destroyed us. Because he hesitated. Because I don't want to go back to being alone. The words hung between us, heavy with meaning. "I'm starting something new," he continued. "Private investigation. Focus on cases the department won't touch. The ones that matter." He turned to face me fully. I could use a partner. I thought about it. About everything we'd been through. About the cracks in my armor that he'd seen and hadn't flinched from. About the way my heart still quickened when he looked at me. "I'm still a fugitive," I said. "Technically. Working on that. The new evidence, Matea's testimony, Cole's confession, it's enough. They're talking about a full pardon. And until then, you're under my supervision. 24/7. A ghost of a smile. Strictly professional, of course. I laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time in months, it felt real. "Of course," I said. He held out his hand. I took it. The cold, relentless detective had finally found something worth more than the truth. He'd found me. And together, we'd find everyone else who needed saving.
Inside, it was exactly what I had expected, and nothing I could have prepared for. Crystal chandeliers dripping from vaulted ceilings. Fresh flowers in every corner. White roses and eucalyptus that cost more than my rent. People in clothes that whispered money rather than shouted it, circulating through the grand foyer with champagne flutes and practiced smiles. I felt like a forgery among originals, but Jasper's hand never left the small of my back, gentle, constant, a silent anchor. Your sister has expensive taste, he murmured, leaning close enough that his breath warmed my ear. The roses are from Ecuador. The champagne is Veuve Clicquot, and the woman by the fireplace in the green dress is judging everyone's shoes, including her own. I almost laughed. How can you possibly know that? Observation, he said simply. It's 90% of the job. The other 10% is knowing when to speak and when to disappear. We made our way through the crowd, and I felt the weight of eyes on us, on me, on the mysterious man at my side, who moved through the room like he belonged in it, like he had been attending events like this his whole life. Maybe he had. I realized I knew nothing about the real Jasper. Only the professional facade. Chloe had already disappeared into the depths of the house, leaving us to fend for ourselves. Typical. She had done her duty, made the introduction, checked the box. Now I was someone else's problem. Laura. The voice cut through the murmur of conversation like a blade. I turned, and there he was. Marcus. He looked exactly the same. Too handsome, with that easy confidence that at once made me feel chosen, and now made me feel sick. He crossed the room toward us, arms open like he had any right to touch me, and I felt my body go rigid. Jasper felt it too. His hand pressed slightly firmer against my back. Marcus, I managed. He ignored my tone completely, pulling me into a hug that lasted 1 second too long. When he pulled back, his eyes were already on Jasper, assessing, cataloging, calculating. And you must be the boyfriend, Marcus said, extending his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm Marcus, old friend of Alara's. Kay Spur took his hand. The handshake lasted a beat longer than necessary. Jasper, I've heard a lot about you. All good, I hope. Marcus's smile widened, but there was something sharp behind it. Interesting, Jasper corrected gently. I've heard interesting things about you. The air between them crackled. I held my breath. Marcus laughed first, breaking the tension with practiced ease. Well, I hope you're ready for a wild weekend. This family knows how to party. Ilara, remember the wedding in Cebu? When you fell into the pool, fully clothed. My face heated. That was 7 years ago, and I still tell the story. Marcus winked at Jasper. She's a mess, this one, but a lovable mess. The words landed like small knives. Too much, not enough. The same script he had always used, the one that made me feel like an amusing footnote in my own life. Jasper's arm slid around my waist, pulling me gently against his side. She's perfect, he said, simply. I don't know about any pool incident, but I know she makes me laugh until I can't breathe. I know she reads 3 books at once and leaves them all over the apartment. I know she cries at commercials, but pretends she has something in her eye. He glanced down at me, and his eyes were soft. I know I'm the luckiest person in this room. Marcus's smile flickered. Just for a moment. Just enough. Well, he said, I should find the others. Rehearsal dinner's in an hour. See you there. He disappeared into the crowd, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. How did you do that? I whispered. Do what? Make him feel small, without raising your voice, without insulting him. You just stood there and told the truth, and it cut him deeper than anything I ever said. Jasper looked at me for a long moment, because the truth is the only weapon people like him can't deflect. He spent his whole life learning how to twist words, how to make you doubt yourself, how to turn your insecurities into his power. But he can't twist genuine affection. He can't weaponize someone actually seeing you. His hand found mine, and I do see you, Ilara. That wasn't a performance. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. The rehearsal dinner was held in a glass-walled conservatory attached to the main house. Candles floated in pools of water on every table. The setting sun painted the vineyard beyond the windows in shades of gold and rose. I sat between my mother and Jasper, picking at food I couldn't taste. My mother spent the first 30 minutes complaining about the seating arrangement. Then she spent the next 30 complaining about the flowers. Then she turned to Jasper with the kind of smile she usually reserved for people she wanted something from. "So, Jasper, what do you do?" Here it was, the Inquisition. "I'm in private security," he said calmly. My mother's eyebrows rose. "Security, like a bodyguard. Sometimes I also consult for companies on risk assessment, threat analysis, that sort of thing." Stared at him. He hadn't mentioned this. The agency profile had listed him as entrepreneur, which I had assumed was a polite way of saying nothing. "Threat analysis," my mother repeated, clearly unimpressed. "How exciting. It has its moments." Jasper smiled, utterly unbothered by her dismissal. "Last month, I was in Dubai. Next month, Tokyo. The work keeps me moving." "Moving," my mother said, as if the word tasted bad. "And how did you meet my daughter?" Jasper's hand found my knee under the table. She was reading in a coffee shop, one of those places with too many plants and not enough outlets. I sat down across from her, pretended to work, and spent an hour trying to figure out how to say hello without sounding like an idiot. I almost choked on my wine. He had invented an entire meet cute on the spot, and it sounded more romantic than any first date I'd ever actually had. Finally, she looked up and caught me staring. He continued. I panicked and asked if she knew the Wi-Fi password. She said no. Then she smiled, and I forgot about the Wi-Fi entirely. My mother's expression softened slightly, reluctantly, but sweet, hot. "It was the beginning of everything," Jasper said. And for a moment, he wasn't looking at my mother. He was looking at me, and there was something in his eyes that made my chest ache. Across the table, Marcus watched us. His jaw was tight. Later, after the toasts and the terrible speeches and the awkward small talk, I escaped. The estate grounds stretched behind the main house, rolling hills of dormant vineyard and carefully manicured gardens. I walked until the noise faded, until the only sounds were my footsteps on gravel and the distant whisper of wind through bare branches. I found a stone bench overlooking a frozen fountain and sat down, hugging my arms against the cold. "Thought I might find you here, Jasper." He approached slowly, giving me time to tell him to leave. I didn't. He sat beside me, close but not touching. "Your mother is looking for you. Something about brunch seating and a disagreement with the wedding planner." I laughed bitterly. "She can wait." We sat in silence for a moment. The stars were beginning to appear, faint pinpricks in the darkening sky. "Sorry," I said finally, "about all of it. My mother, Marcus, this whole ridiculous weekend. You didn't sign up for this level of dysfunction." Jasper turned to look at me. "Elara, I've been hired by people whose families make yours look like a therapy commercial. I've sat through dinners where grown adults threw food at each other. I've mediated arguments about inheritance that would make you lose faith in humanity entirely." He paused. "Your family is fine. Your mother is predictable. Marcus is transparent. And you," he trailed off. "What? You're the most real person in that room." His voice was quiet. "Do you have any idea how rare that is? How exhausting it is to spend your life around people who perform every conversation, who calculate every compliment, who measure every word for maximum advantage. And then you walk in, and you're just you, awkward and anxious and trying so hard to survive, and somehow that makes you beautiful." I couldn't breathe. "Jasper, I know this is a job." His voice was steady, but there was something beneath it, something vulnerable. "I know you paid for me to be here. I know there are rules, but I need you to understand something. When I said I see you, I meant it. Not as a client, not as an assignment, as you." He reached out and took my hand, his thumb tracing slow circles on my skin. And if nothing else comes from this weekend, I need you to remember that. You are not too much. You are not enough. You are exactly the woman who showed up tonight and held her own against people who have spent decades learning how to make others feel small. A tear slipped down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. Why are you telling me this? Jasper was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because 5 years ago, I was you. I was the one who needed someone to tell me I was enough, and no one did. It almost destroyed me. He looked at me, and there was pain in his eyes. Real pain. I won't let that happen to you. The wind picked up, cold against my wet cheeks. But Jasper's hand was warm in mine, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was freezing. Ready to go back inside? He asked gently. I shook my head. Not yet. So we sat there on that cold stone bench, under a sky full of stars I hadn't noticed in years. And we didn't talk. We just existed, together. And somewhere in the silence, I stopped pretending. When we finally walked back toward the house, hand in hand, I saw Marcus watching from a second-story window. His face was shadowed, but his posture was rigid, angry. I should have been scared. Instead, I squeezed Jasper's hand tighter and kept walking. The wedding morning arrived, gray and cold, the kind of winter light that made everything look bruised. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my assigned room, wearing the bridesmaid dress Chloe had chosen. It was the color of faded champagne, designed to complement the bride without competing, which meant it washed me out completely, turned my skin sallow. It made me look like I hadn't slept in weeks. I hadn't. Last night's conversation with Jasper replayed in my mind on an endless loop. His words, the way he looked at me, the way my heart had cracked open just enough to let him in. This was dangerous. He was dangerous. Not because he meant me harm, but because he made me believe I deserved something I had stopped hoping for. A knock on my door pulled me from the spiral. You decent? Jasper's voice warmed through the wood. I opened the door. He stood there in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, no tie, the top button of his white shirt undone. He looked like he had stepped out of a movie, the kind where the mysterious stranger sweeps the heroine off her feet and rides away with her into an uncertain future. You clean up well, I managed. His eyes traveled over the dress, and something flickered in them, something that made my stomach flip. You look, he paused, searching for the right word. You look like you're about to face an army. I laughed, but it came out hollow. That bad? That real? Okay. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. How are you feeling? I turned back to the mirror, unable to meet his gaze. Like I'm wearing a costume. Like I'm about to walk into a play where everyone knows their lines except me. Jasper appeared behind me in the reflection, close but not touching. You know your lines. You've known them your whole life. The problem isn't that you don't know what to say. It's that you've been saying the wrong things to the wrong people. His hand settled on my shoulders, light but grounding. Today, you say nothing you don't mean. You smile at no one who hasn't earned it. And you remember that I'm right there, in the front row, watching. I met his eyes in the mirror. Why does that matter? Because someone should be watching. His voice dropped. Someone should see you, the real you, not the version your family expects, not the woman Marcus tried to break. Just you. The moment stretched between us, fragile and electric. Then my phone buzzed on the dresser. Chloe's name flashed on the screen. Duty calls, I whispered. Jasper squeezed my shoulders once, then let go. I'll be waiting, okay? The ceremony was held in the estate's chapel, a small stone building that smelled like old incense and fresh flowers. I stood at the altar with the other bridesmaids, holding a bouquet of white roses that trembled slightly in my grip. Chloe walked down the aisle like she had been born for this moment, because she had. Every step was measured, every glance perfectly timed, every smile calibrated for maximum emotional impact. She was a masterpiece of performance. Okay, and everyone in that chapel was her audience, including Marcus. He stood across from me, positioned as best man, his eyes finding mine with unsettling frequency. Each time, that small smile played at the corners of his mouth, the smile that used to make me feel special, the smile I now recognize as the prelude to pain. The ceremony passed in a blur of vows and rings, in the hollow echo of applause. Chloe kissed her husband. Everyone cried. I stood frozen, counting the seconds until I could breathe again. Then it was over, and the reception beckoned. The reception hall had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Twinkling lights draped from the ceiling, long tables laden with flowers and gold-rimmed china, a dance floor that seemed to beckon, promising escape through movement. I found Jasper at the bar, nursing a glass of water, not drinking. I asked, sliding onto the stool beside him. Okay, working, he said simply. Someone needs to keep their head clear. I wanted to ask what that meant, who he was watching, what threats he saw that I didn't. But before I could, Marcus appeared at my elbow like a ghost I couldn't exorcise. Ilara. His voice was warm, familiar, designed to disarm. Can we talk? Privately. I felt Jasper tense beside me, but he didn't intervene. He waited, letting me choose. There's nothing to say, Marcus. Please. His eyes softened into something that almost looked like sincerity. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Then I'll leave you alone forever. Forever. The word dangled like bait. I looked at Jasper. He gave a small nod, barely perceptible. Trust yourself, the nod said. I'll be here. It's 5 minutes. I agreed. Marcus led me away from the crowd, through a side door and onto a small terrace overlooking the frozen vineyard. The cold hit immediately, stealing my breath. You're freezing. He started to take off his jacket. Don't. My voice was sharp. Just say what you need to say. He stopped, let his hands fall. For a moment, he looked almost human, almost vulnerable. I was wrong, he said. About you, about us, about everything. I said nothing. I've spent 2 years regretting how I treated you, the things I said, the way I made you feel. He stepped closer, and I stepped back. He stopped. I was young, stupid. I didn't know what I had until it was gone. Marcus, let me finish. His voice cracked slightly. I see you with him, Jasper, and I see the way he looks at you, like you're something precious, and I hate it. Not because I want you back, though I do. God, I do, but because he gets to have what I threw away. The words landed hard, not because I believed them, but because they were exactly what I had once wanted to hear. 2 years ago, this speech would have undone me now. Now, it just made me tired. You don't get to do this, I said quietly. You don't get to show up at my sister's wedding and whisper pretty apologies and expect me to fall apart. I did that once. I spent 2 years doing that, waiting for you to become the man you pretended to be. I've changed. Have you? I met his eyes. Or did you just get better at performing? Something flickered in his expression. Something ugly, quickly hidden. You always did think the worst of me. Okay. No, my voice was steady. I thought the best of you for far too long. That was my mistake. Not anymore. I turned to walk away. His hand caught my wrist. Not hard, not violent, just enough to stop me. Laura, wait. But before I could respond, before I could pull away, the terrace door opened. Jasper stepped out, and the air changed. His movements were unhurried, almost casual, but there was something in his posture that made Marcus's hand drop from my wrist like he'd been burned. Everything okay out here? Jasper's voice was calm. Too calm? Fine, Marcus said quickly. I wasn't asking you. Spur didn't look at him. His eyes were on me. Alara? I should have said yes. I should have smoothed things over, diffused the tension, played the peacekeeper like I always did. Instead, I said, he grabbed my wrist. The silence that followed was absolute. Jasper turned to face Marcus fully, and for the first time, I saw something in him that I hadn't seen before. Something cold, something dangerous. Did you? Marcus laughed, but it was nervous now. It was nothing, just a touch. We were talking, and she was leaving, and she said, you grabbed her wrist. It wasn't like that. Jasper took a step forward. Just one, but Marcus stepped back. I'm going to give you some advice, Jasper said, his voice quiet and utterly without warmth. You're going to stay away from her for the rest of this wedding. You're not going to talk to her. You're not going to look at her. You're not going to breathe in her direction. Marcus's jaw tightened. You can't tell me what to do. You're right, Jasper smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. I can't, Kay, but I can tell you what will happen if you don't listen. Another step forward. I spent 10 years in private security. I've worked in countries where the rules are suggestions and the consequences are permanent. I've dealt with men who would eat someone like you for breakfast and forget to taste by lunch. Marcus was pressed against the terrace railing now, so when I say stay away from her, it's not a threat. It's a promise, and I keep my promises. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Marcus pushed past Jasper, nearly running, disappearing through the terrace door without looking back. The door swung shut behind him, and suddenly we were alone in the cold, the sounds of the reception muffled and distant. Jasper turned to me. The ice in his eyes melted instantly, replaced by concern. Are you okay? Did he hurt you? I shook my head, but I couldn't speak. Couldn't process what I had just witnessed. Jasper closed the distance between us, his hands cupping my arms gently. Ilara, breathe. I've never seen you like that, I whispered. Like what? Dangerous. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I told you I was in security. I didn't tell you everything. What didn't you tell me? He looked out at the frozen vineyard, at the gray sky, at anything but me. I wasn't always a consultant. I spent 8 years doing close protection in conflict zones. War zones, Ilara, places where charming doesn't work, where the only thing that matters is knowing how to read a threat and how to neutralize it before it gets close. He finally looked at me. I've done things I'm not proud of. I've seen things I can't unsee. And when I saw him grab you, when I saw that look in his eyes, he trailed off, shaking his head. For a second, I wasn't here. I was somewhere else. And that scares me. I should have been scared too. Any reasonable person would have been. Instead, I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around him. He stiffened for just a moment. Then his arms came around me, pulling me close, holding me against the cold and the fear and everything else. Thank you, I whispered into his chest. For what? For showing up, for seeing me, for being dangerous when I needed you to be. His arms tightened. Always, he said. Always. The reception was in full swing when we re-entered. Laughter and music spilled through the hall. Champagne glasses clinked, and somewhere a toast was being made that nobody would remember tomorrow. But I felt the shift immediately. Eyes followed us as we walked back to our table. Whispers curled through the air like smoke. Marcus had clearly been busy spreading his version of events, painting himself as the victim of an overbearing boyfriend with anger issues. Jasper seemed unbothered. He pulled out my chair, waited for me to sit, then took his place beside me with the casual confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. You're being watched, I murmured. I know. He reached for his water glass. Let them watch. My mother descended within minutes, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Ilara, darling, I need to speak with you. She didn't look at Jasper. Privately, Kay. Anything you need to say, you can say in front of Jasper. My mother's eyes flickered to him, then away. This is family business. Jasper is family. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. At least, more than most people in this room. My mother's expression tightened. For a moment, I thought she would argue. Instead, she leaned close and whispered, "Marcus says your boyfriend threatened him. Physically. People are talking. Ilara, this reflects on all of us." I felt the old instinct rise, the urge to apologize, to explain, to make myself smaller so she would feel better. But Jasper's hand found mine under the table. Marcus grabbed Ilara's wrist, he said, his voice perfectly level. I asked him not to do it again. That's the extent of the interaction. My mother blinked, thrown by his directness. That's not what I heard. Then you heard wrong. Jasper smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Perhaps you should ask your future son-in-law why he felt entitled to put his hands on your daughter without permission. The question hung in the air, unanswered and unanswerable. My mother straightened, gathering the remnants of her composure. We'll discuss this later. After the wedding, she swept away, and I let out a breath. You keep doing that? I said. Doing what? Standing up for me, even when I can't stand up for myself. Jasper looked at me, and something in his expression shifted, softened. You can stand up for yourself, Ilara. You just forgot how. Being around people like that. He gestured vaguely at the room. It's like drowning in slow motion. You don't realize you're going under until you can't breathe. I wanted to ask how he knew, how he understood me so completely after barely 24 hours. But before I could, the music changed. A slow song began, and couples drifted toward the dance floor. Dance with me, Jasper said. It wasn't a question. I don't dance. Neither do I. He stood, extending his hand. We could be terrible together. I took his hand, on the dance floor, surrounded by swaying couples and twinkling lights. Jasper held me like I was made of something precious, one hand on my waist, the other clasping mine, close enough that I could feel his heartbeat through the layers of fabric. You're thinking too hard, he murmured. I'm always thinking too hard. Tell me one thing, one real thing, right now. I looked up at him. The lights caught his eyes, turned them warm. I'm terrified, I admitted. Not of Marcus, not of my family, of this, of you, of feeling something I wasn't supposed to feel. His hand tightened on my waist. What were you supposed to feel? Nothing. This was supposed to be a transaction, a performance. You were supposed to be armor, and I was supposed to walk away at the end of the weekend and never see you again. My voice cracked. But you keep being real. You keep seeing me. And I don't know how to go back to pretending after this. Jasper was quiet for a long moment. The song played on around us, oblivious to the weight of the words passing between us. Lara, he finally said, I broke the rules tonight. What rules? The rules of my job. The rules I've lived by for 5 years. He pulled back slightly, just enough to meet my eyes. I got emotionally involved. Not tonight. Not yesterday. The moment you got in that car and looked at me like you were waiting for me to hurt you, like everyone always hurts you. And I wanted, more than anything, to be the one person who didn't. I stopped breathing. Not supposed to tell you this. I'm not supposed to feel this. But I can't pretend anymore. His voice dropped. You're not a job to me. You haven't been a job since you asked about the Wi-Fi password and smiled like you were surprised. I was still talking to you. That was an act, I whispered. You made that up? I know. He smiled, sad and sweet. But the feeling behind it wasn't. I've been looking for reasons to touch you all weekend, to protect you, to be near you. And every time I find one, I tell myself it's professional. It's the job. But it's not. The song was ending. Couples around us were applauding, laughing, drifting back to their tables. Neither of us moved. I need you to know something, Jasper said. Before this weekend ends, before you decide what any of this means, I waited. My past. The things I told you about. The war zones. The close protection. The things I've done. He swallowed hard. I wasn't just insecurity. I was in situations where the lines got blurred, where protecting people meant making choices that haunt me. I've carried guilt for years. I've carried secrets I could never share. And I've stayed alone because I didn't think anyone would understand. His hand cupped my face, gentle and trembling slightly. But you look at me like I'm not broken, like I'm not dangerous, like I'm just Jasper. And I don't know how to thank you for that. I don't know how to tell you that you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. What? My voice was barely a breath. Hope. The word hung between us, fragile and immense. Then someone cleared their throat behind us. We turned. Chloe stood there, radiant in her wedding dress, her smile fixed in place, but her eyes sharp with calculation. There you two are. Ilara, I need you for photos. Family only. Her gaze flickered to Jasper. No boyfriends. Jasper stepped back immediately, professional masks sliding back into place. Of course, I'll be at the bar. He squeezed my hand once, then disappeared into the crowd. I followed Chloe toward the photographer, my mind spinning. He had just laid himself bare on the dance floor, and now we were supposed to smile for pictures like nothing had happened. The photos took forever. Endless poses, endless combinations, endless instructions from a photographer who clearly hated his job. Chloe beside me, Chloe with our mother, Chloe with the groom. The whole bridal party, just the sisters, just the family. Through it all, I scanned the room for Jasper. I finally spotted him near the bar, but he wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, older, elegant, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. She was speaking intently, and Jasper's posture had changed, stiffer, more guarded. Even from across the room, I could see the tension in his shoulders. The photographer called for another pose. I complied mechanically, watching the scene unfold in fragments between flashes. The woman touched Jasper's arm. He shook his head. She leaned closer, saying something that made him go completely still. Then she turned and walked away. Disappearing through a side door, Jasper stood frozen for a long moment. Then he looked up across the crowded room and found me. Even from that distance, I could see it. Something had shifted. Something had broken. I excused myself from the photos, ignoring Chloe's protests, and crossed the room as quickly as I could without running. When I reached him, his face was pale. "Who was that?" I asked. Jasper looked at me, and for the first time since we'd met, he looked lost. "My past," he said quietly. "Her name is Dr. Alina Vance. She's a war crimes investigator." The words landed like stones. "She's been looking for me for 3 years. There's a case. A massacre. I was there, swallowed. I witnessed things, Ilara. Things I was never supposed to see. And now they need me to testify." I stared at him. She said, "They can protect me. Witness protection. New identity. New life." His voice cracked. "But I have to disappear. Completely. And I have to decide tonight." The room swirled around us. Music and laughter and champagne. All of it suddenly meaningless. "When would you have to go?" "Tomorrow morning." He met my eyes. "After the wedding." "It's tomorrow." After everything. After he had just told me, I gave him hope. Lara's voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know what to do." I looked at this man who had protected me all weekend, who had seen me when no one else did, who had just admitted he was broken in ways I couldn't imagine. And I made a choice. "Then don't decide alone," I said. "Not anymore." I took his hand. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we figure it out together. But tonight, you're still here. And so am I." His eyes glistened. "I shouldn't drag you into this." "You're not dragging me. I'm walking right beside you." For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then he pulled me close. wrapping his arms around me like I was the only solid thing in the world that had just turned to water. "Thank you," he whispered into my hair. I held him tighter. The reception continued around us, oblivious. Chloe posed for more photos. My mother complained to someone about something. Marcus lurked in the shadows, nursing his wounded pride. But none of it mattered, because in that moment, holding a man who had just had his entire world upended, I realized something profound. The fake date had become the most real thing in my life, and I wasn't going to let him go without a fight. We didn't sleep that night. Instead, we sat on the cold stone bench where everything had shifted between us, wrapped in blankets stolen from my room, watching the stars fade as dawn crept toward the horizon. Jasper told me everything. The massacre happened 8 years ago in a region I couldn't pronounce, let alone find on a map. He had been part of a private security detail protecting a humanitarian convoy. What they walked into wasn't a village. It was a gravesite with buildings still standing. "They didn't expect survivors," he said quietly, his voice raw from hours of talking. "They didn't account for someone hiding in the rubble. Someone with a phone. Someone recording." Khan held his hand as he spoke, feeling the tremors that ran through him. I got the footage out. Sent it to contacts I trusted. Then I ran. Kept running for 3 years. Changed my name twice. Took jobs that kept me moving, kept me invisible. He laughed bitterly. Even started the fake dating thing because it was perfect cover. Who looks for a war crimes witness at a wedding? The wind picked up, and I pulled the blanket tighter around both of us. Dr. Vance has been drazing me for 2 years. She finally found a trail through an old contact. She says the case is going to trial. They need my testimony to convict the commanding officer. He looked at me, and his eyes were hollow. If I testify, I disappear. New identity, new city, new life. I can't have contact with anyone from my past. It's the only way to keep me safe. Past, I repeated. "You mean me?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Jasper. I turned to face him fully. "Look at me." He did. "I didn't hire you to fall in love with you. I didn't plan any of this. But here we are. And if you walk into that witness protection program tomorrow, I'll lose you. Not because you don't care, but because some monster decided to destroy a village 8 years ago." His jaw tightened. "I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's not my place. But I need you to know something, okay?" I took his face in my hands, the way he had done for me on the dance floor. "You are not broken. You are not dangerous. You are the man who saw a stranger in a car and decided she was worth protecting. You are the man who stood up to my toxic ex without raising a fist. You are the man who held me on a dance floor and told me I gave you hope, okay?" Tear slipped down his cheek. I caught it with my thumb. "Whatever you decide, I'm grateful. For this weekend. Okay. For you." For the first time in years, I felt like someone actually saw me. My voice cracked. "And if you disappear tomorrow, I'll understand. But I'll also spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been." Jasper closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had shifted. "It's another option," he said quietly. "What option?" Dr. Vance said, "The protection program is one path, but there's another. If I testify and they convict, and if I'm willing to take certain precautions, I don't have to disappear completely. I just have to be smart, lay low, change some habits." He searched my face. "It's riskier. There's no guarantee, but it means I don't have to become someone else." My heart hammered. "Why would you take that risk?" "Because I spent 8 years running, 8 years hiding, 8 years telling myself I didn't deserve to be seen, to be known, to be loved." He took my hands, and then he looked at me like I was worth something, like I was just a man, not a witness, not a target, not a ghost. He pulled me closer. "I don't want to be a ghost anymore, Ilara. I want to be here, with you, if you'll have me." The sun rose slowly, painting the vineyard in shades of gold and amber. We watched it together, hands intertwined, neither of us speaking. There was nothing left to say. The choice was made. The path was chosen. At 8 o'clock, Jasper's phone buzzed. "Dr. Vance," he answered, listened, spoke in low tones I couldn't quite hear. Then he ended the call and turned to me. "She's arranging protection for the testimony. Local police, federal oversight, the whole production. It's happening in 3 months. Until then, I stay with a friend in a secure location." He paused. I asked if I could bring someone. My breath caught. "What did she say?" "She said it's unprecedented, highly irregular, potentially dangerous." A small smile played at his lips. "Then she said she'd make it work." I launched myself at him, wrapping my arms around his neck, laughing and crying at the same time. "This is insane," I whispered. "We've known each other for 2 days. 3, he corrected. "And I've known you my whole life. I just hadn't met you yet." The wedding brunch was a blur. Chloe found me afterward, pulling me aside with an expression I couldn't read. "I heard about Marcus," she said quietly. "What he did, what he's been saying." I braced myself for the usual dismissal, the usual defense of the golden boy. "Instead," she said, "I believe you." I stared at her. "Marcus has always been charming, too charming. I saw the way he looked at you this weekend, the way he watched you. It reminded me of someone." She paused. "Dad." The word landed like a punch. Our father spent years making Mom feel small, making us feel small, and we all pretended it wasn't happening because he was charming, because he was successful, because that's what families do. Her eyes glistened. "I didn't protect you from Marcus because I never learned how to protect anyone, including myself." Chloe reached out and took my hand. "I'm sorry for all of it. For every time I made you feel like you weren't enough. For every time I chose appearances over truth." She squeezed. "You're my sister, and I'm proud of you. Not because of Jasper, not because of any of this, because you're still here. You're still fighting. You're still you." I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her. Really hugged her. For the first time in maybe ever. Jasper and I left the estate in the same town car that had brought us there. The city rose on the horizon as we drove, glass and steel and the promise of something new. He held my hand the entire way, thumb tracing slow circles on my skin. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now, we find breakfast, somewhere with too many plants and not enough outlets." He smiled. "Then we figured out the rest. The rest being 3 months of hiding, followed by a trial, followed by whatever comes after." He looked at me. "It won't be easy. It won't be safe. There will be days you regret ever getting in that car." I thought about it, about the risk, about the uncertainty, about the man beside me who had seen war and loss and still found room in his heart for a stranger who needed armor. "I won't regret it," I said. "Not a single second." He lifted our joined hands and kissed my knuckles. "When this is over," he said quietly, "when the trial is done and the dust settles, I want to take you on a real date. The kind where I pick you up at your apartment and bring flowers and pretend I'm not terrified." "Terrified of what?" "Of you. Oh, of this. Of how much it matters." He met my eyes. "I've faced down men with guns. I've walked into places most people run from. But you scare me more than any of it, because you make me want to stay." I leaned over and kissed him, soft and slow and real. "Good," I whispered against his lips. "Then stay." The city swallowed us whole. But this time, I didn't feel lost. I felt found. The case would come. The danger would come. The months of hiding and waiting and wondering would come. But for now, there was this, a man who saw me, a future I hadn't planned, a love that started as a lie and became the only truth that mattered. Jasper squeezed my hand. "Ready for whatever comes next?" he asked. I looked out the window at the city rushing past, at the life waiting for us, at the uncertainty and the fear and the possibility. Then I looked at him. Ready? I said, and I meant it.